Hello and welcome to this episode of Spotlight on the Divorce Expert. And today we're going to talk about something a little bit different. I have my dear friend, Michele Benyo. She's going to talk to us about something that I think as parents going through divorce, or even as grandparents supporting people going through divorce, it's going to be really important to think about how children, especially young children, are going to experience grief. So I
Mhm.
want to introduce Michele briefly. She's a certified grief recovery specialist, an early childhood educator, a parent coach, and the founder of Good Grief Parenting. And
Mhm.
Michele is also an up and coming best-selling author. And I am so excited to have the opportunity to take a look at her book because I think it's really going to provide both insight and inspiration and practical guidelines for parents dealing with young children and sibling loss and other areas of grief. So,
Mhm.
Michele, welcome.
Thank you, Marty. It's so good to be here talking with you.
It's always great. And it's
Yeah.
funny, before we got on this recording, I was telling Michele, I was looking at my calendar, and we go back to meeting and working together in a mastermind way back in 2021. So we've been
Yes.
together for a while as
Mhm.
colleagues and friends and collaborative professionals who work together. Michele,
Yes.
before we get any further, there is one thing that I think people need to know about you is you're not just coming at this idea of childhood grief and parenting through the loss of a child through just a theoretical approach. Can
Mhm.
you share a little bit about what brought you to this area? Because this is a tough thing for a lot of families to have to deal with.
Mhm. Mhm. Yes, it is. And, I became a mom in my mid-30s and I loved it. And so I went back to school and got my master's in family education, my licensure in early childhood parent education. I was an educator at heart, went back to become a parent educator in early childhood and had my second child. So my son was 4, my daughter was 15 months. And my son was diagnosed with cancer, and I was less than a year into my new career as an early childhood parent educator. But of course, I was just totally focused on my two young children. And I found that, the parenting part while he was alive and while we were navigating this was a challenge. But after 2.5 years, he died, and his little sister, who was then 3.5, said to me, "Mommy, half of me is gone." She was just 3.5, and she was able to articulate that loss of her brother in that way. And so, of course, I was attuned to all of that and thought, okay, she can't grow up half gone. What am I going to do? And I thought, I'm in the field. I'll just find the best resources. And there weren't any. I was
Right.
not able to find a book. I wasn't able to find anything that addressed early childhood loss.
Right.
The things I found about child loss were really parent focused. And so I thought, okay, I have my work cut out for me. It was my plan, it was my thought that as we walked this journey, I would be, I would be working with other families and sharing what I knew. But I found that her journey was just so important and big to me that that was 25 years ago. She's now in her late 20s, and I'm finally really, I mean, I have been for about 5 years now, focusing on other families and helping them recognize what really young children experience in grief. And of course, I didn't know much of anything about grief of any kind. I had never had such an experience. And so over these last years, I have found every resource I could put my hands on. I've not seen a whole lot more come on the scene. There are a few, but there still is such a need for adults to recognize what young children need when they have a loss, because they grieve just like we do. I mean, they grieve also.
Yeah, and this is such an important topic. And um, so today we're going to take a little step away from that very
Hmm.
specific issue of the loss of a sibling, the loss of a
Hmm.
child in a family. And we're going to talk more generally about how children handle grief. And Michelle, thank you for sharing your story. Every time you tell it, I feel that, I feel
Mhm,
that real emotional pull.
mhm,
And I
mhm.
also recognize how this isn't an easy subject to talk to people about. And that's why I think it's important for parents going through a divorce to realize there may not be a loss in the family, but there is a loss, a grieving process for children. And every kid
Yes.
is going to do this differently. So let's talk a little bit, Michelle, if you're comfortable, just
Oh,
sharing
absolutely.
what are kind of the symptoms? I hate to use that word because that makes it sound like it's a problem. It's not a problem, it's a
Hmm.
natural process.
Yes.
But what are the signs or the indicators that parents may be looking for if they're going through a divorce or have been divorced, and maybe a parent's become an absentee person in the child's life? What might the kids be experiencing or expressing, or how do you detect this in children?
Often you don't, and that's sort of the key. It is a tough subject. And even though I learned, everything I learned about my daughter, of course, I'm very focused on that sibling relationship and how important that is. But all the rest of what I learned is just applicable to young children. And as adults, we tend to want to protect them. We look at them and they're playing, so we think, I don't want to upset the apple cart. And so, what I tell parents is two things. One, childhood is the best time for us to learn about grief. We don't want our kids to. I didn't want my daughter to face this. We actually went through a divorce as well. You don't want your kids to face this, but when they do, then we need to help them with it because we're going to be building resilience skills that will serve them for the rest of their lives. My certification as a grief specialist was through the Grief Recovery Institute, and they are so clear about all the different ways we experience loss and grief. It's not just death. There are, all different kinds of things, including divorce, loss of physical health, loss of finances, moving away. The story Inside Out is the story of Riley who moved away and then her parents were so happy and she was so sad. So there is a lot of loss.
Yeah,
Especially with little ones, you are not going to see it and you're going to think they're okay. They don't have the words we have. They don't have the expressive capacity of emotions that we have. So what you're likely going to see, there are probably three things. One might be even my daughter who said, "Mommy, half of me is gone." Much of the time, she was playing happily. And
sure.
if I tuned in, she might be singing as she's playing. Oh, how I wish my brother was here. But she was just playing. She didn't do a lot of crying. She didn't do a lot of telling me she was sad, but yet I knew. So they may be playing. They may be acting just more obnoxious than usual, or maybe quieter than usual. They may be, doing those behavioral things. They may be whinier and clingier. And so any kind of behavior that feels for young children and older kids too, but particularly young children, where they might be doing some sort of regressive stuff. They maybe sucked their thumb and they didn't, and now they are. And um, one mom shared a story with me about her daughter having stomach aches and not being able to sleep well. And she took her child to the doctor and she said, and this was actually a situation of a sibling who had died. But, she said to the doctor, well, her sibling died about 6 months ago. Do you think that could be this? And the pediatrician actually said, no, I don't think that's it. Yes, that likely was it. Where they have a lot of physical symptoms. They may have tummy aches. They may not want to eat what they usually eat. It's going to be things that you wouldn't necessarily associate with grief.
So it sounds like if you notice a shift in their behavior or their personality, I'm going to use
Hmm.
that term, or their
Yeah.
their well-being, where
Hmm.
because I do see this a lot with families when there's a divorce, kids will want to um kids that were independently sleeping in their own beds now all of a sudden want to sleep in mom's bed at
Yes.
mom's house and dad's bed at dad's house. And
Mhm.
there's a point where that's not a sustainable practice. And so,
Right.
but that can be a sign, right, where the kids are
Certainly. They think about the child, whether you see it or not, they're confused. They don't really know why this happened. They feel very insecure. The two people they loved and counted on are now not in the same place. There are feelings that they're sensing, animosity, anxiety. The parent they're with may be crying. They're aware of all of this upheaval, and if you're not talking to them about it, it's very scary.
right,
And so, even if the child isn't showing you anything, the other thing I tell parents is you can know that your child is grieving, even if you don't see anything, because their world has been torn apart. So, you need to give them opportunities to talk about it and say, mommy and daddy are not going to be living together anymore. How do you feel about that?
right.
And let them tell you, mommy's very sad, but I think we needed to do this, and there are going to be a lot of changes, and some of them we're not going to like, but we're going to get through this.
Yeah,
Ask them if there are things they're wondering about and let them tell you, well, I'm wondering, am I ever going to see daddy again? Or, what? Let them just open the conversation
right.
and let them tell you, ask you what they want to know, give them just the basic information, let them ask more details if they want to. And again, we're talking about really young children. Naturally, if children are a bit older, they're going to know more, they're going to be aware of more, they're going to ask more.
Right.
Um, Even young children can have anger, though. I mean, we think of that, I think, as more of an adolescent teen response, but even young children can feel anger about it.
Yeah. I was going
So,
to say I taught grade one and two, first and second grade for gosh, 12 years. And
mm,
I can remember one young lad in my class who would get up every day for show and tell and say, my mom and dad are divorced. My mom hates my dad. My dad hates my mom. And I just feel so sad about everything. And
mm,
so we
bless
called the
them.
parents. The parents
Hmm.
were not. The parents did not have this high level of animosity, but the
Yeah.
child misinterpreted from the
Yes.
child's perspective. It seemed like parents were really upset with each other because they were not
Yes.
living together anymore. And I really believe in my heart these parents were not bad mouthing each other. It was just the child was just perceiving all of this.
Hmm.
It was really
Why
interesting.
else would they not live together?
Exactly,
Right.
exactly. And so, we talked to him. They had the child in therapy after we talked to them about what he was saying. And the therapist said, just let him talk about it. That's what he
Hmm.
needs to do.
Hmm.
And, within about, I'm going to say about 6 weeks or so, he just got off the topic and,
Hmm.
just moved along. But he
Right.
needed to have that place to talk about it, I think.
Hmm.
So
Yes.
I so understand what you're saying there, Michelle.
Yes. And when they do express those feelings, don't try to make them feel better. Don't try to say, oh, you don't have to feel angry. You're going to, just say, yes, I understand that you're angry, or yes, I can understand why it might seem like we hate each other. We don't, this is what's happening. We just feel like we need to live apart because,
Yeah.
we want different things, or whatever you're going to tell
Yes.
the child, and give them a narrative that is easier for them to feel good about and is still truthful. Always be truthful.
Yes.
Never make something up, um, even if the truth might hurt your child.
Right.
Um, if the parent has done something, you need to handle that very carefully. I mean, with young children, again, you would likely say, we're just not able to live together. When they get older, they're going to have more of an understanding of what really happened.
Right.
And you need to be honest with them about it. And find ways to talk about that spouse that doesn't damage that relationship that they have with
Right.
that spouse, because that's not about you. That's about the child and the other parent, and your relationship cannot, ought not to rupture that.
Right. And one of the recommendations I always give my parents is to say, mommy and daddy are not going to live in the same house. And I'm not going to
Hmm.
tell you the reasons because that's for us to know as parents. But
Hmm.
what I want you to know is I want you to love your mom and your dad, and your mom and dad are going to love you. And
Right.
we are going to make every effort so that you have as much time with both of us as
Hmm.
you want. And
Hmm.
if you can't say that, because you don't know if maybe the other parent it doesn't want to have
Hmm.
anything to do with the
Hmm.
family anymore, then you can still say, "I love you, and
Hmm.
we're going to do a lot of things together, and I'm here to support you and talk to me about whatever you need."
Hmm.
So there
Hmm.
are, even in, like, you're right, Michelle, even in tough situations, you can still talk about what you're going to do as a parent,
Right.
even if you can't talk about what the other person's going to do. So, what are some tips and strategies you may have, Michelle, for helping parents who are going, "Oh my gosh, I never thought about this," or "Yes, I realize that my child is going through this grief process." What are some practical strategies, ideas, tips that you can give to just help parents know that they're on the right path?
I really do think that the being able to talk to them is the key. I talk about four keys to make this situation better for your family, and it's the acronym HOME. And I've talked about some of them already. The first one is honesty, and that is being honest with your child. And if you can't be honest, then just don't say it. Just, say something much more basic. Another thing is optimism. Always, it feels awful when something tears apart. Grief feels awful. And what your child is feeling and what you are feeling is grief. We don't always assign that word to it because there's so much emotion around what happened. And but grief is that response to loss, and divorce is a loss. Your child is grieving, you are grieving. Sometimes you may even find another person. You may find some things that make you feel happy. You may notice that your child is still not happy, and that's understandable because you're finding this peace. They're not. They're still missing what they had, and we need to honor their grief. It's different than ours. And
Right.
so that's an important thing. But just to be optimistic about we're going to get through this together. With Deanna, we often talked about things being an adventure. Her dad was still in her life. We got divorced a year after her brother died. And he spent time with her, but she was with me full time. And we just had lots of adventures. And I think and probably said to her sometimes, well, this isn't the way I want it to be, but this is the way it is. So we're just gonna, make the best of it and be upbeat about your situation, because the truth is that is what it is and you can't change it. And you want to give your child that sense of resilience and optimism, that realistic optimism, that growth mindset that we can move beyond this. And
Yes.
then and that plays right into my program is called Good Grief Parenting, and one of the main I have four heartbeats, which are a little bit different than what we're talking about now, but one of them is essential messages, and that's just good parenting where you are giving this child the messages they need to hear. I love you. I'm so glad you're here. This is hard, but you know what? We're going to get through it. We're going to figure it out. All of these things that are the messages they need to hear in the midst of what they're going through, including, boy, it makes sense that you're mad about that. I'm kind of mad about that too. The idea that everything that we feel and experience is okay, but we're going to get through it. And so all of those messages about them being valuable. And then the last one is the enduring bonds piece. That's another piece from Good Grief Parenting. When a person dies, we know that continuing the bond with the person who has died is a healthy, good way to heal, even though for many years people felt like they had to kind of sever that relationship and move on. Certainly with divorce, of course, we want to continue that relationship. And that's why it's important to enable them to be with that parent, and to have things. Another thing that helps children is for them to have something from the past place, whether it's something from the person that is gone now, or something from their bedroom. If they had a bedroom they loved, can you bring the curtains? Can you bring some things? Can you make it appear like it did? So that continuing bonds piece, or enduring bonds piece, is really important. And, if they change neighborhoods, if you can go back and let them still be with their friends and associate with some of the people they knew, that's a really helpful thing too. Not always possible,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Well, thank you,
mhm.
Michelle. And I think those are really practical. And I like that acronym of HOME because that's
Yes.
simple, it's easy to remember.
Hmm.
Before we get off the call, though, we're just about out of time. I would
Yes.
like to talk or have you talk a little bit about your upcoming book. Can you share a little bit? Give us the
Yes,
title and tell us a little. You got a final title, right?
I do.
Yay. Okay.
I have a title, and then I have a subtitle, so it gets kind of long, and I don't always remember the subtitle. But the title is How Am I Supposed to Do This? Hope and Healing After Child Loss. And then there's a subtitle that's just designed to let the reader know that I'm addressing this early childhood, age 0 to age 8, because there just is so little support for that age group, and so many, it's so much misinformation. We
Right.
think they don't grieve and that kind of thing. It's a parenting book, first and foremost. When my son died and my daughter said that to me, that became my focus. And I that's what I really wanted to hang on to, because as I learned about young children's grief, I speak to and train childcare providers and preschools and places where kids are grieving all kinds of things, not just sibling loss. So there's much in the book that is appropriate for parents raising young children. But I also had to start with that piece of grief, understanding what grief is, recognizing what we go through as parents. And so for you, the parents watching your pod or watching this video, to recognize that when you are feeling physically depleted, you know, um, divorce can be every bit as debilitating as the death. I mean, it is the death of a marriage. It's not the death of a person, but it's a
Right.
death. And
Yes.
it can be, there can be very physical symptoms, and they can go on, and you can wonder, what is this? It's grief. And how you're grieving is the way you need to grieve. You may need support with your young children because they can't wait on you. They can't wait on the adult support, but you can get support. So all of this. So I start the book just letting parents know what they can expect as the adults who are grieving, and then how young children grieve, and because we don't recognize that, and then just all of the things that I would encourage families to do to build resilience and strong, healthy relationships that are going to help the family grow up happy and whole. That's the whole point of good grief parenting, and for parents to recognize that that's possible. And hopefully, after a divorce, you recognize that that's possible too. Sometimes it feels very, very hopeless.
Yeah.
And so I really want parents who read my book to have a sense of hope, and know that there are real definite things they can do in their family to help everyone come out on the other side happy and whole.
Yeah, what a great resource and what a much needed resource it sounds
Mhm.
like out there. So, Michelle, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing all these tips and insights. And of
Yeah.
course, we'll be looking for your book when it comes out. After it actually launches and hits the book stands, we'll have you come back on and talk about it again. So,
Awesome.
Michelle, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Marty. It was wonderful to be here with you.
And I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode of Spotlight on the Divorce Expert. And if you enjoyed this, be sure to like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel.